7, please. Hey guys, welcome to Fox, obviously YouTube. Best guest is Tarek. I put on a show on with us today. Really, best guest. I co-host on a California. Tim Stafford.
Co-host from California. Dude,
this
you killed
intro
it.
gets better and better.
Dude, your intros get better and better, Seffi. Yes. How are you today?
Good.
It was a half day, right? So it was your house day today?
Karaticus Day.
Yeah, Karaticus Day. Yeah. Nice. There it is. Yep, you had red on today because it was Karaticus Day.
Yep.
What is a Karaticus?
Karaticus Finch.
Wow. Stafford, thank you.
Stafford, thank you. Wow. But it was fun though, right?
I mean, it's fun, yes.
Yeah.
Hey, Seth, do you know what I
Yes.
said in my classroom yesterday on accident? Do you know I'm a teacher?
Yeah?
So
And in my classroom, my student said something and I said, "Wow."
He said "Muau" in his class. Seth has invented words, and they're amazing.
No.
So yesterday is yesterday. It's a
Oh,
cross
I like that
between
too.
yesterday and ago. So yesterday is the best.
Yes,
And
to
then
go.
Muau is a combination between a cat and a cow. Avi. And so Muau is just when there's something to be said and wow doesn't work.
Yep.
Ted,
What?
like, anger is sadness and joy and
Enjoy anger and sadness and joy.
Yes, yeah.
Yep. So Muau is kind of a combination of all those.
yep.
Ooh,
Perfect.
it's just got deep.
Muau. All right, give me that. I love you, son. Good job on the intro. It's getting great. Ladies and gentlemen, first of all,
Wow.
and second of all, we are on YouTube, ladies and gentlemen. I know we keep bugging you, but if you're interested, Seth, you could see what he looks like. And in the interview that we have forthcoming, Seth steals the show. He comes in late from school. He calls from the bathroom, and then he sits on my shoulder and makes faces at the camera.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't want to miss any of that, kids.
Nope.
So if you go to Voxology TV on YouTube, you can smash that subscribe button. Hey, guys. So today, Tim, we've got a big, and I mean big episode.
Big.
Yeah, I mean, all of our episodes are big, and, you know, we're incredibly well-known and very important people, but
That's right.
this is extra big and important for several reasons. Number one, we have a special announcement. And this is the first time we've announced this. All right, so
Yeah.
listen very carefully.
Very exciting.
This is actually one of the coolest things we're going to do this year. So what we had several goals we talked about on the podcast heading into 2023. One of those is to revamp Patreon. One of those is to revamp the way we connect and do community. That's coming probably in the second half of the year. One of those goals was to get on YouTube. Check. And then one of those goals was
Don't know if you guys heard.
Yeah. If you didn't know yet, one of those goals is to do something specific for people in vocational ministry that helps kind of deal with the chaos and the nonsense that we're all in the midst of. And so we have a whole Patreon community and a Tithely community that financially supports this. We're run exclusively by the crowdfunding we receive. And we also have a couple of donors who were just incredibly generous. And one of them gave us a grant or a gift to do something that we've been wanting to do for a while. And so second week in May of this year in Nashville, we're going to have our first ever Voxology pastor / minister, children's workers, vocational ministry / people gathering. And what that means is we have space for 18 people, and we can pay for all the lodging and all the food and all the stuff on this end. You just have to get to Nashville and then to our church. When is it, Tim? May 9th?
Yes.
Yes. May 9th, 10th, and 11th. Anyway, let me say who this is for while Tim confirms the date, because we're super detailed this way.
May 9th, 10th, and 11th.
There it is.
Nailed it.
Nailed it. So we're going to gather 18 of us. And it's for 48 hours from Tuesday at 4 to Thursday at 4. Like I said, all expenses are covered except for travel and if you need a rental car. You've just got to get to our church in Brentwood. You're going to be staying in Franklin. We have all sorts of fun things we're going to do, but let me describe who this is for. This first one is going to be for people who are in some sort of vocational ministerial capacity who are hanging on by a thread. The idea we've been using is how do we stay sane in a world that's gone crazy, a church that's gone crazy, and the understanding what pastoring is, that's gone crazy too. And so we have a spiritual director coming, a therapist coming, Tim and I and Susie will be there, and we're going to process together in small group sessions. What does it mean to be healthy? And what are rhythms that are happening in our churches and dynamics happening in our churches where we should walk away? Where are places where we can recognize there's health and we should stay and fight for it? Where are places where we just realize for our own sanity, we've got to get out? And we hear from so many of you who are in difficult church situations that we just want to do something to help. And so literally, I want you to know there will be alcohol involved. If that is a problem, I just want you to know it's going to be available. We are going to spend a lot of time talking and being with each other and hearing each other and seeing our disappointments and our struggles and our pain. And then, like I said, I'll have a little piece of conversation, and then we have a spiritual director and a therapist who are coming in to talk about how it is that very often church work is dehumanizing, particularly as it's conceived in American settings. So here's what you need to do. If you're interested in this, because we only have room for 18, you need to email us at hello@voxpodcast.com and say you're interested in coming. We will then hit you back with a Google form.
Maybe put like pastor or something in the subject line. What do you want them to put in the subject line?
Yeah, pastors gathering. Even though I want to be clear, it's not just for I mean, if you're it's ministry adjacent. It doesn't have to just be pastoring. So if you're a director at a church or you're youth pastor, whatever, that we just mean pastor in the most generic sense possible. But we will hit you up with a Google form that we'd love for you to fill out, because this is a gift from the Vox community to the Vox community. We want to really steward those 18 spots well, and really have it just for people who are deeply in crisis. So that means that it's not the first 18 people that email us, but we're trying to find the folks for whom this might be the most helpful and the most urgent. And so anyway, we're super excited about it. It is in Nashville. We'll be meeting in our church, the church that Susie and I lead together, called Journey Church. It's in Brentwood, Tennessee. We will have a field trip one night, and we'll have I think I've talked enough. Tim, you want to add anything to all of that talking?
I just think just simply that this podcast, since its inception, has been about creating a safe place for people to be authentic and to wrestle and to, do all of that. And I think this is the next level of that, or this is a physical manifestation of that, where this will be a place to just be open. And if that's in tears, or if that's in celebration, or if that's in telling your story or whatever, there'll be a lot of that kind of time of just, being amongst other people who have felt the same, trauma or whatever. So yeah, I'm very excited about it. I think this is going to be a very cool thing.
Yeah. So Anyway, this is the first we've announced about it. So please email us if you are interested at hello@voxpodcast.com. Now, today, we're going to spend a little time on something we referenced last episode, namely the book that Joshua Wright and Butler is releasing. I think, I haven't heard that it's pulled, but it's called Beautiful Union. The first excerpt of which was on the TGC website, the Gospel Coalition, and then they released the full chapter. I've read 5 or 6 chapters of it. He was coming on our podcast at the end of this month, and we were looking forward to having a conversation about sexuality. I had not read the book before the article and the excerpt came out. And obviously that's been a source of much consternation in the Twittersphere, blogosphere, whatever. And so today what we wanted to do is, first of all, he is somebody we've had on the show, and he's somebody I would call a friendly acquaintance. And we reached out and I had a great conversation with him. And that will remain private because I was mostly just concerned about how he is in the midst of all of this. The human soul isn't designed to receive, a zillion negative messages. But, he knows that people are thoughtfully disagreeing. And so today we want to break our show into 2 parts. The first part is Seth breathing in my ear, and that's okay. Just
Sorry,
heavy
Mike.
breathing. Sorry, Mike. I know. I for a while I was Dad, and every now and again I'm Pops, and then I was Dad Mike for forever, and now
Dad Mike.
it just exactly. But now it's Mike, so I'm not sure what to do.
Welcome to Mike's podcast.
Welcome to Mike's podcast.
Yes.
Well, it's Mike and Tim, or Tim and Mike, if it's anybody's. Now, the first part of the show, we want to just talk very briefly about some of the theological questions or objections. At least, again, I haven't read the full treatment, so maybe he addresses them later. The second part of the show is the much more important part, and that is we're bringing our friend Suzie Lind, pastor, an amazingly gifted teacher. And she has a friend who is a spiritual director and just a fellow traveler in the way through purity culture and all of the craziness around the way sexuality gets messaged to women. And we're going to spend about 50 minutes just hearing them talk about how they filtered some of the stuff that was written. And in both of these, conversations, Josh is not the point. The point is the view. And, you could make a case, as I've read some of the other chapters, that, wow, that first chapter probably wasn't the best one to lead with. But it holds a theological position that has been held by countless believers throughout the centuries, namely that the sex act itself holds symbolic or even more significance for embodying the gospel. Thank you, Seth Erre. Amazon delivers.
Mail delivery. You've got mail.
Yes. See, that's what Amazon should have that little saying piped out of their speakers as they go driving around. It's iconic, ladies and gentlemen, just like sex is. But we felt like, as two dudes, we want to be very much in touch with our limitations to talk about current cultural issues, because the message that we received about sexuality was twisted in its own way, and we refer a little bit to that in the interview. But the message that women, at least the women that in our lives and kind of in our evangelical affiliation, the messages they've received are beyond gnarly. And so even if the intention of the book was to be helpful and the intention of the book was to not harm, which I'm utterly sure that it was, we explore a bit how, if you've been raised in certain respects, how you're going to hear this. And it may be intended to be a beautiful and compelling picture, but it's not received that way. And so Susie and Katie are going to spend some time on that. Yes, thank you, Seth. Before we get started, Tim, anything you want to add to set up the interview? They are great and honest, but they're talking about things I can't and Tim can't relate to. And so we just wanted to find a couple of sisters who are very good at expressing themselves, who influence and have lots of conversations with other women, and can sort of speak to, wow, it's not that there are parts of this view that are wrong, but they've been weaponized.
Yes.
And some of the language gets
in
weaponized.
the name of Jesus.
Yes, that's it. Exactly right. So, just very briefly, I think maybe we're kind of all done or not. I don't know, talking about the details of all of this. But for Tim and I just want to spend a couple minutes on some of the issues we might have with the way the chapter came across. And again, I've read more than the chapter, and I also want to shout out, if you're interested in reading what some very, very smart women have written about this, I want to recommend the following people to you. These are all people I follow on the tweets, and man, there has been a lot written. There's an article by Amy Peeler that was, I think, in Christianity Today's website. She's also written a book that is on my list, and we're trying to get her to the show. It's called Women and the Image of God, I think it is. Women and the Gender of God, I think it's what the title is. Anyway, she's written some stuff on this. Beth Felker Jones wrote an article on this that was phenomenal. Other people worth following: Beth Allison Barr, who we've had on the show, Christy Hemphill, Laura Robinson, Danny, and I think it's Treweek, Treweek, Amy Bird, who we've had on the show, and then Sheila, and I don't know how to pronounce her name, Gregory, Gregoire. She reached out to us on the tweets, and so we might be having her on in the near future as well. All that is to say, these are some great female perspectives on what's happening. And as guys, we've received our own messaging we've got to overcome. But I don't think we can quite approximate or empathize totally with is how this view gets cobbled together in the midst of past experiences and bad teachings and distorted stuff to really create some I don't know, traumatic stuff for people.
Well, it's not just a message; it is creating a reality that people live in. I don't know if that gets lost, if flesh and blood gets lost in rhetoric. I'm sure it does, but like this is something that people just keep teaching from the pulpit, but it's harming.
Yeah,
folks. So it's like,
yeah, and I mean, even egalitarian views have been used to harm people. So I get that. But there's an element to this conversation that, as dudes, we might think it's a beautiful theological position without any awareness of how this plays down the line in the real lives of women who have husbands who think that it's their God-given right to have their bodies. And so anyway, so I want to start by reading a quote from the Gospel Coalition. And they say more about feminist theology than this, but one thing they do say is that the central premise of feminist theology, that the church, the Bible, and even the God of the Bible are misogynistic and bad for women, has been accepted by many, if not most people in the secular West. Now, first of all, I don't know that that's a central premise. If you're talking about non-Christian people and how they look at the Bible, then absolutely it's been accepted because it's been shown how badly women are treated in certain branches of Christianity. Absolutely. But I read that as for those of us who would call ourselves like feminist theologians, no, we don't think the church, the Bible, and the God of the Bible are misogynistic. We think people are. And that the church has been hijacked by power structures and theologies that have a vested interest in oppressing women. Now, that's not all. I mean, there are so many good Jesus-loving people who hold complementarian views. I'm not saying that at all. But for them to wonder that or complain that the central premise that the church, Bible, and God have been are seen as misogynistic, I think that's on us, not on anyone in the secular West. I think that's our problem.
Yeah.
And I don't think that a lot of expressions of complementarian theology do justice to what the scriptures actually teach. So I have an issue with how this conversation is approached. People experience Jesus as a liberator, and Paul too. So it's not God, it's not the Bible that are misogynistic, not at all. But it's certainly the way that people have read and interpreted and practiced it that are at issue. One of the other issues that, as I was reading the book, and Josh addresses this, I don't know if he, more so addresses it, but at least from my understanding, the point of the picture of the union between husband and wife isn't that sex pictures the gospel, but marriage pictures the gospel. And the way Paul uses the metaphor in Ephesians 5 is about the self-sacrificing reciprocity. What is that? Reciprocity. Man, I know that word. Reciprocity and mutuality. That marriage and not so Josh very much focuses on the sex act in ways that are even uncomfortable. I don't know that it's the sex act that is what's being the driving image here. It's marriage. And if you're going to say the sex act, it pictures anything, I think it actually pictures the image, the reuniting of the image of God. Because in Genesis, we read, male and female, he created them. And the reunification of male and female is the reunification of the fullness of the image.
Yeah,
Not only that,
you spent a bunch of time on that in a recent episode. If people go back,
yes,
picking apart that scripture as that being a full representation.
Yes, and again, this is an egalitarian reading of this, absolutely. So one critique is I don't think that the gospel is pictured by sex. I think the gospel is pictured by marriage. And obviously Josh would disagree. Great. I think when Josh refers to one flesh, he says one flesh is the sex act. I disagree. I think one flesh is a kinship unit. So in those days, one flesh, and in Genesis, it's the man leaves his father and mother and is united to his wife, and they are one flesh. So the idea is he leaves the kinship unit and starts a new one. That's the picture. So I think the operating principle of sex being a picture of the gospel isn't as defined as I think Josh kind of presents it as being. I also think it's just dangerous, man, to use terms like generosity and hospitality to define the sex act, and it seems like that the man is the Christ figure and the woman is the church figure. That's rough. I think that, again, it depends upon complementarian readings of certain texts where I would disagree with how those texts are to be read, and I would go, I'm not quite sure. I think Paul talks about the husband and wife belong together and express mutual hospitality and generosity, and that too much is being read into biology there. There's so much more to say, but I want to get to the interview. I see that some of the assumptions that are carried into the conversation are, I don't know, I think assumptions that I don't know that are well established in the book. And so I don't know who the book is for. If it's for non-Christian people, the image of Christ in the church is gross for them. I think if it's for Christian people to kind of recapture the beauty of the sexual ethic, I just don't know. I don't know if that's the best image, or if even if it's the one that the Bible uses and puts as much weight on as he does.
Yeah.
But I think the biggest critique that I'm seeing out there is, hey, do you realize how this gets translated into real marriages?
Yeah.
And one of the things that our sisters talk about is that there are the appropriate disclaimers, of course. And Josh, no way is trying to harm or add to harm. No. But that nevertheless, because of the messaging in certain evangelical circles, this fuels men having perceived dominance over women's bodies, and that they're the gift, and that women are merely to receive the gift, and that's all it is. And there have been other Christian commentators that have been jumping on and saying, yeah, if sex is anything for other than procreation, it's a selfish act, which, I mean, I wonder if we're reading the same Bibles. Because Paul talks about the man owning the woman's body, the woman owning the man's body, the whole mutuality and reciprocity thing going on right there. I don't get it. Anyway, all that is to say, Tim, you want to add anything just to that very superficial sort of, I'm just not sure I buy it for biblical reasons. And I think there are, the harm reasons are the ones we really want to explore.
Yeah. No, I think the guests today will do more justice to that than I can. But even when you were just talking through that stuff, I was like, how many different stories or pieces of scripture pop into your head when you think about how Jesus approached and validated women, and within those specific circumstances, how he edified them or didn't shame them in gender situations. And it's just so weird. And then even in Ephesians, when you were going through and you were talking about Paul inverting all those power structures,
right?
And it's just like, it's really frustrating to see this kind of ideology perpetuated when it seems to have to me personally, I'll just say for me, it seems to have no root in anything other than, and Susie says this, power over. And we cling to that power over. And you see it in our marriages, you see it in our social structures. It's gross. Makes me feel gross.
Well, I was reading an incredible article. Let me see if I can find it real quick. And it was an older pastor who was resigning. What I would say to the pastor who follows me. And it was 4 points. The age of the megachurch is over. Because churches will be smaller, they will be run by co-vocational staff and volunteers. One of the things he says, because I've wrestled a lot with, have we as Americans kind of erred too far on the whole internal therapeutic presentation of the gospel? The gospel is here to give me peace. The gospel is here to alleviate my loneliness. And I think there are times when I'm like, yeah, I think we really have, spent too much time presenting Jesus as king of my heart.
Yeah.
And so I get that. But one of the things that this guy says is to the pastor who follows him, trauma is the new reality. For years, we've been discussing the breakdown of the nuclear family without fully understanding the long-term ramifications. Now they are being lived out in front of us. Few people are stepping into their futures with a solid base for their lives. People get married hoping their partners will fix them. Couples have children hoping the child will make their marriage complete. Most people are walking around with massive amounts of trauma. The church isn't dealing with a clean slate, therefore. And I think this is an issue that for people like me, I'm not going to speak for you, but I see this in you too. People who are out trying to say, hey, Jesus really is a lot better than everyone's thinking. There's an awareness of that reality that we have to lean into and learn from. And so part of the reason I was so interested in having Susie and Katie come on was just so I could learn how that stuff is seen. Because I can very easily think, oh well, yeah, I don't know that I agree with that or whatever.
Right.
As if it were some abstract theory.
Or that, and no offense, but that your opinion or your stance on it is the gospel. You know what I mean? Like the
Totally. Yeah. My therapist and I are working very much on, I have a what would he say? My Christianity is only above my neck. And because I'm thinking and wrestling and love ideas, but in this case, man, there's a lot more to it than that. So anyway, enough of our yapping. Here you go. Please enjoy. Let us know what you think. Okay, everybody, we're bringing in the heavy hitters today. Looking at me via Riverside FM, I have Tim Stafford, who, of course, heavy hitter. Suzie Lind, as Seth calls her, Suzie P. Lind. Now, the P stands for pastor. It also stands for perfect and personable, which all are true. Suzie is an elder and pastor. Wow. And the executive pastor at the church I serve at. And so technically, she can tell me to shut up, and she does. She very often exercises that power, and for that we're all.
But I do it in love.
In love,
I do it in love.
Absolutely. And then we have a friend of Suzie. So, I asked Katie how she wanted to be introduced, and she just said she's a spiritual director. She is an Enneagram coach, but most significantly, she's a friend of Suzie. And for those of us who know and love Suzie, that is a tight inner circle, and that itself is credibility. But Katie is also, are you a fellow? Are you, what's your role?
I mean, you can call me that. I am the director of content and community at the Center for Formation, Justice, and Peace.
It's a big business card.
She basically runs the thing.
Yeah.
She runs the thing.
Yeah, we need an acronym for that. So the center,
Well, Center FJP. CenterFJP.org is actually our website.
I don't know how
still
abbreviated that might be. So we'll work on that. Anyway, this is Katie Haseltine, and we are so delighted. Katie and I met.
Oh, she's an author. You should go with that, too. She's an author.
Oh, I am an author.
Nice.
Published author.
Okay. Well,
a really great book.
Published.
Well,
yeah, I will rave.
Does Mike not have my book?
I don't know.
Does Mike?
I don't know.
Mike needs your book.
Coming
and
to you.
Tim would really appreciate your book.
Well,
Why
it's coming
does
to you.
Mike need and Tim appreciate her book? Can you just specify exactly what we're talking about?
Well,
here?
because I feel like it's not your go-to. It's probably not your go-to spiritual practice, but it's one that if you did often, especially the way she leads through it, you would really like it.
Are you talking about fasting?
Tim no. Tell me about it, Katie.
I would never write a book about that.
What's the book on?
The book is called All the Things, a 30-day guide to experiencing God and the prayer of Examine.
Oh, yeah.
So we're looking at the prayer of Examine and then just taking 30 different takes on it. How do you do an Examine for your feelings? How do you do an Examine around boundaries? How do you do an Examine? Just different ways we can engage that prayer. And the whole point is just to notice God in the everyday of your life.
Love it.
And so I meant it to be a very gentle, accessible book where anyone who wants to try to see God in their everyday would feel able and welcomed to.
That's fantastic. I didn't even know that. See?
Yeah.
So this is Katie Haseltine, author. and friend of Susie, and director of content and communications, and Enneagram coach, and
Spiritual director.
So yeah, try to put that.
You may have oversold me, but
Listen,
great.
ladies, I don't know if you've heard, but there is trouble in the Twitterverse. Somebody said something wrong, and doggone it, Tim and I, as two middle-aged white men, feel like it's our responsibility to set that straight. But we realize, as two middle-aged white men, that there were elements to this article that are not, and I'm being serious now, but are not in any way, shape, or form captured in our experience. So we're going to go over the language and some of the theology and some critiques that direction. But the thing that's been so heartbreaking, because this is actually a view, the idea that sex is an icon of a spirituality or spiritual union. I mean, that's been around a long time, and people have been using Paul's pictures in Ephesians and call back to Genesis as an image of this. I mean, it even was so popular that the Song of Songs became interpreted as an allegory of Christ and his church, which it is most certainly not. But that's a different topic. So one of the things that as Tim and I were processing this, we wanted to talk about, and we know that you both are in situations where you're talking to lots of other women who are being very vulnerable. We wanted to talk about the harm, like not just the theological harm, but how practically some of this language or these images gets worked out. And so I just wanted to start by asking each one of you, and you can be as specific or as general as you'd like. When you were growing up as a young woman in the church, what were some of the messages that you were receiving about sexuality, whether they were communicated explicitly or they were just kind of behind the scenes assumptions? That's a question for the ladies.
Go ahead.
You want me to go ahead?
Yeah.
Thanks, Susie. Here's what's an interesting thing about me is that I grew up very nominally Christian. I was one of those Easter and Christmas and Wednesday night youth group. It was a free dinner. I was in the children's choir. My parents dropped my sister and I off at church to do the children's choir once a month and went home and read the paper. So the environment in which I grew up was not overly Christian. I didn't, but when I was in high school, I came to faith at age 17 in a very, very conservative denomination and was immediately taught that I was to be subservient to men. And that was very explicitly
even in
taught.
sexuality. Or was that even addressed?
Well, I don't know. I don't even know that it was connected to sexuality, but when it's taught that men are in charge of you, you just assume all things from there. But I went away to college. I joined the InterVarsity. I got on the leadership team, was roundly rebuked by my leaders at home that was inappropriate. I came off the leadership team. And from there moved here and got into a really, again, conservative, reformed environment. And I was young, newly married, and was being quoted Mark Driscoll often. And that had to do with a lot of the messages specific to sexuality were, it's really on you to take care of his needs. So you need to be having sex this many times a week. You need to be making sure he gets what he needs or he'll stray, or all of that was very explicit. That was not just understood. That was explicit.
That's insane.
I had a leader's wife say, when asking me about how my marriage was going, was always asking about our sex life, because that was an indicator of it. And not that it isn't. Right. I mean, I think any counselor will tell you there is some truth to that, but to have that in that context, it carried this additional weight. Yeah. And so I think that idea that women should be, it was understood that women weren't going to be that interested in it. That was it. Men are visual. men want it all the time. So don't deny them. And it doesn't really matter if you don't feel well, if you've just had a baby. There were all the jokes, like, you know, we were all young women having babies at the same time. And the joke is that all the men, it's like they were portrayed as these puppy dogs sitting there waiting for your 6-week checkup that, you know, are we here? Are we here? Can we do it? Can we do it? It just was a lot. So all of that, there was a lot of pressure around to have your body be ready, no matter what it was going through or anything like that. It was just this. So if you liked it, that was weird. If you didn't like it, that was weird. If you, it was a little bit of a no-win situation. Yeah. But those are some of the biggest messages I remember.
That's my son, Seth, being dropped off.
Great.
Yep. It's a half day and his triumphant return to the Voxology podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, Seth Erre. We just started recording. We knew there would be a holy disruption, and here he is. Do you want to say hi to everybody?
Susie P. Lane, good morning.
Susie P. Lane, good morning. And that's Katie.
Hi,
that's
Seth.
Miss Katie.
And Mr. K, good morning. And
yeah.
AU.
And Tim Stafford, good morning.
Good morning.
How was school, son?
Good.
Awesome. All right, can we record a little bit?
Sure, yeah. Go ahead,
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Sure, yeah. Go ahead, Mike.
You do you, Mike.
I'm so sorry to interrupt. Thank you. Katie, Susie, were those similar messages for you too, or was that not as explicit?
I mean, I didn't grow up in a Christian home either, but I grew up in a very conservative Middle Eastern home. So the messages were similar in terms of like, like saving myself for the man that I marry, and like, the value of my virginity was really held high. And then I became a Christian, and I started following Jesus in high school, and I actually had a really great youth group experience. So my youth pastor and the youth leaders that were all there, they actually did a really good job of trying to teach us how to date in healthy ways and that kind of thing. And then it was after I got married, actually, when the church that we were in it started as a Foursquare church. And if you don't know anything about the Foursquare movement, it was actually started by a woman. But in the time that we were there, they started moving away and actually left the Foursquare denomination, became non-denominational, but also were really into like the teachings of John MacArthur, Mark Driscoll, C.J. Mahaney. I mean, we tried to become Sovereign Grace for a minute, so it was all of that, and it was at the beginning of the whole biblical manhood and womanhood movement, and complementarian was the term that I was introduced to as we were trying to navigate what we believed about women in ministry. And I mean, I took it all in, and I was part of it all, and I supported it and believed it for the most part, although the women in leadership thing, I was really conflicted by. So I ended up having to do my own study and came to different conclusion, which I think we talked about on another podcast. But I mean, the prevailing message was very similar to Katie's as far as a woman's sexuality. And as I hear Katie talk, I'm so heartbroken, because I was in those meetings with women where they were told, like, well, if your husband has a porn problem, if you have sex with him more, it would help him. And, whatever his issue is, if you have sex with him more, that will help relieve his tension, because men have this tension that they just have to relieve. And
over and over, that was said.
And your husband, I mean, I remember people saying things to me like, well, when your husband goes to work, he's confronted with all these temptations all day long. So you have to give him something he wants to come home to. And Katie, I prided myself, and I publicly repent for this right here, right now. I actually took pride in the fact that I was one of those leaders that would ask the people I led, like how it was going for them at home with their intimacy with their husbands, because I thought that's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to care about every part of this person. And this is a big part of it. And it's just so cringy now. So cringy.
Well, and I think it was also on top of that, it it assumed that the best and highest use of my life was to be a wife and a mom.
Yeah.
And I wanted to be
sure.
a wife and a mom. I am thankful that I got to spend my children's childhood with them. I was a stay-at-home mom. But it is funny when I look back at all my friends in that setting. We were all in this complementarian, ultra-conservative setting. We were all these frustrated leaders. And so we just kept starting different ministries. And they were all women's ministries and kids ministries. And we were PTO presidents. And we were, we did all these. We started little businesses. We were hustlers. It was like who we were was going to come out no matter what. But it was all sideways. And no one invited us to the table as far as to say, you have these gifts to the world. And so it wasn't even so much that I understood that my sexuality was being controlled. It was that my whole personhood, like who I was as a woman, was owned and controlled and led by women or men. And there wasn't, and the first time a man had coffee with me, a pastor, and said, these are your gifts, and this is how we're going to use them, was mind-blowing to me. But I think, so the outworking of some of these, so we're going to probably have to talk some brass tacks about the article and what it said, but I just want to say that it isn't just the assumptions about sex that the author made that were so troubling. It's that this worldview of how you see women is so damaging. And it really, we are not allowing women to be their whole person.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Well, go ahead,
I think
Susie.
too, I just want to add to that a bit of my experience, because I was in leadership in a church that really valued my gifts in a sense, but it was like they valued them to the extent to which they felt it was appropriate for me to use them. So, like I was told at one point I would make a great executive pastor if I had the right plumbing.
Good Lord.
So I didn't have that title, but I was given the responsibility of it, right?
Yeah.
And there were people in the church who felt very strongly and were vocal about, I should be at home with my kids, and that's the priority for me. And my kids have always been a priority for me, but I lived in Los Angeles and I had 4 of them, so I had to have a job. And so it was like, there were a lot of mixed messages for me. So on the one hand, it was like, yes, here, go do this, and we love you, and thank you for all your work. And then on the other hand, there was this, well, the highest value you have, the most important calling you have is as a wife and a mom. And so there was always this tension that I was living in of like, is this too much? Is it too little? Am I doing enough? And I honestly didn't feel like I was winning anywhere. So it really did create a lot of moments of crisis for me. When I look back on, I can identify now.
Oh, no doubt. I can't. One of the reasons why we wanted to talk with you both is I know that those sort of messages are said, but when you hear concrete instances of that happening, and then picturing my 17-year-old daughter hearing those sorts of things, it paints a whole different picture. Yeah. So when we get to the article, what were some of your first responses?
Well, I sent it to Susie as if to say, I'm going to leave this right here.
Good morning, Susie. Good morning.
Good morning, Susie. Have you seen this disastrous?
No, I think actually you said, she also added, how are we supposed to flourish?
I did. I may or may not have said, how are women supposed to flourish with this kind of stuff being circulated? And then she said, well, what did you find problematic? I want to know if it's what I found problematic. Because I still think, even as women, it's hard to say, we don't like that. We were not given that permission to even say theologically in my circles. So it is, I think, and you might disagree with this, Susie, but I think sometimes we're still trying to figure out what's okay to say and not okay. I mean, you and I can take a walk and say whatever we want, but when we're talking about things like that, we are measuring and guessing and wondering, how do we speak into this kind of stuff? But I think I think for me, my initial thoughts, well, I can just say I felt really angry for lots of different kinds of women that I've met with over the years. I think the people that I have met with and whose stories I have been privileged to walk alongside, those faces were the faces that I was thinking about. Because if you're going to equate, in some sense, what I read was you're going to know God or see God through sex. What about all the people who can't or don't, or for whom it's problematic to have sex, right? So there's already these closed doors of who's allowed access to God. I think obviously it was a very male-centric view. I nearly died at the generosity, hospitality equation of men being so generous as to share their sperm with a woman, and it is her job to be hospitable. And of course, we were allowed to then read the first chapter, and I was horrified to read that the biggest problem with prostitution is not that it's majority men who are buying sex from women and exploiting them, but that prostitutes have turned an act of hospitality into something that should be paid for. I mean, and he said prostitution, not great. Women are forced into it. He said rape is not the right way. He said the right things. But the outworking of that theology in the beginning leads to this idea that the worst thing about prostitution is that it turns an act of hospitality into something that should be paid for. And it just made me feel as a woman, is this really all there is, guys? Come on. It just can't be. It can't be. And don't turn my Jesus into this power hungry. I don't know. I did not like Jesus penetrating the church. I just did not appreciate the language. I was super creeped out by it all. This is not the Jesus I know. And I mean, I would say that's initially.
Yeah.
Susie?
Yeah, it just felt like an assault with words, it wasn't good. Yes, to all the things that Katie said. I mean, we pretty much, saw it in similar ways. And I think because Katie and I both minister to a lot of women, it was really hard for me. I mean, especially just in the last couple of weeks alone, I feel like I've walked with a few women who have been experiencing abuse in their marriages and or had before, and emotional abuse and sexual abuse. I mean, I had just talked to someone who was weeping because she was trying to work out things with her husband, and he acted as though her body belonged to him and that she owed him, and so, and I mean, there's scores of women who that has been their story, where it's like you're told, like, it's your responsibility. This is what we do. And it just we talk about this a lot, Mike, like we love hospitality. Like even that word was used, it just really frustrates me because that's not hospitality to me. But it was very male centric and very power over, is how it came out. And after reading the first chapter, I was grateful that he gave a nod to, all the other things, but it did just feel like a nod. And so when you're a person who's been through those things, it's almost, it's just not even gratuitous. It's just, it's hard. I mean, women who have struggled with infertility, I mean, are they not hospitable because they're not able to produce? Women who are living in the slums of Haiti, I mean, does this apply to them too? So, I mean, if it's the gospel that we see, if sex is an icon to the gospel and it's to lead us to salvation through the gospel, I don't know that it applies to the ends of the earth.
Yeah.
In that way. It just didn't seem like it to me. So,
and
I've only read the first chapter.
Yeah, same. I've only read the first chapter, to be clear. That's all I've read. But I did think it was like even further with that hospitality thing in the first chapter, he goes on to say, this is why you shouldn't essentially deny him unless you absolutely have to. And he made some reference to, it's not men who are saying they've got headaches. It's, it's that these are old tropes.
It's women who are the problem.
Men constantly want it. All you have to do is walk into a room and a man's turned on, and you just need to be there for it. You can't be getting away with saying you have a headache. You can't be saying you're tired. Come on now. And it just, ugh.
Yeah. And so in 2023, the thing that we're seeing so much in women's ministry, a lot more than we ever have, are women coming in saying they actually want it more than their husbands, but their husband's libido has been shut down because of their addiction to pornography. So like, that's a whole nother thing. And I don't know if he addresses that elsewhere in the book, but there's actually, many cases where a woman does want it more than the man, and he's not up for it for various reasons. But that is a big one that we're seeing in people today is how sexual addiction affects our actual ability to connect and engage in embodied sexuality.
Totally.
I also think it's a little confusing to be told constantly that men are visual, so you need to look a certain way. But then also men are visual,
So you need to be modest.
so you better cover up. I need you to look amazing and sexy for about 10 minutes a day, and then I need you to just wrap
tone
that
it
up
down.
for the rest of the time. Just tone it down. And so they're very confusing, even images. And when you layer that on top of Instagram feeds full of, and I'm going to get more because I just said it, lotions, Botox, frownies, lip fillers, anti-aging, whatever. I mean, it's just, I don't really know how women are supposed, I think it's already hard enough. And then if somehow our beauty is connected to our, what we owe our husbands, partners, that's just a lot of weight.
What does a liberating message for female sexuality look and sound like?
I said to Susie recently, I said, you know what? I'm not sure I know. And so I'm going to research. And so some of the women that even for this conversation that I looked to on Twitter to see, what were they saying? Were they upset about the same things I was saying? What were they saying against it? What were they saying? And what I really appreciated about a lot of these women on Twitter is that no one was coming after the author. No one was saying this is a bad dude. Everyone said, seems like a nice guy. When I read his intro, I could sense his compassion, his desire for people to be helped by this work, not harmed. That was really clear in the introduction. And so I wanted to look to women who were critiquing his words, not his person, and that they were giving me good information. And so I just said to Susie, you know what? I've done a lot of work in undoing a lot of the harmful messages, but the truth is I have more work to do to figure out what is a truthful message, because that's not readily available to us. I mean, it was only, I am divorced, and I spent most of my marriage in marriage counseling. I didn't do counseling for myself. And I got my first counselor that was just for me about 6 years ago. And just what I learned through her it was the first time I let counseling be for me. And so I think a message is, I am loved and I matter before God. My body is well made and loved by God. I don't know what all the good messages are. That's what I'm saying. They're not readily out there.
Yeah, that's why I was curious. Susie, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think I think going back to Genesis 1, we can get some hints of what is really good. There is a sense when you read Genesis 1 and 2 that the creation of man and woman as whole beings, it wasn't good for them to be alone, but there was a goodness in her creation. And so I think knowing that was there before the fall is really important to go back to. That's where it starts.
Yeah.
You know, a word that comes to mind a lot these days is the word consent. When Katie and I were coming of age, we weren't taught that word in the context that it's used now. That wasn't even like, I mean, it was a very basic word at the time. Like, of course, like you would never say yes when you're not supposed to say yes, and always say no when you're supposed to say no. But there's consent has so much more deeper qualities to it now. I mean, you know, I mean, we know that there are lots of young girls that choose to do things that they think they want to do in the moment, and then they have regret after. And there needs to be space for that working out, for them to be able to be respected enough to come with their whole hearts to a relationship, right? And so when you're married, especially when you're married and you're supposed to have this oneness relationship, and I know we're going to talk about what that actually means later on, but when you're supposed to have this oneness relationship with this person that you've made a covenantal commitment to, you know, I think it would be beautiful if in that was taught, like, in that there is consent too. Like, just because you say I do on that day, it doesn't mean anything goes after that. There's loads of things that happen in life. There's things that happen to your body in sickness and in health, right? There's things that happen in your life for richer, for poorer. There's, you know, we go through times of depression and anxiety and death and grief and all these kinds of things that affect who we are. And then sometimes that affects, you know, what happens in the bedroom. And so, like, for those things to be taken into consideration, like, consent goes so much deeper than just yes or no. It's coming wholeheartedly and saying yes with everything that you are. And I don't think young people really understand that, you know, super well. But as we get older, we do. And as we're in safe, committed relationships, hopefully we do. So those would be some things that come to mind for me when you talk about ideals. So
and I would add to that, Susie, the word mutuality. I think that's been a really helpful word for me as I think about, you know, a relationship that works is something that's mutual, that you're both submitting to each other. You're both being vulnerable. You're both being, I think that mutuality would imply that you both have days and seasons and moments and times that work, don't work. Like you said, things happen to your body. Can we also acknowledge that men have body issues as well? It's not just women, that there may be insecurities, there may be, and what does it like to be mutual, reciprocal? It's like that sense of, it's kind of the verse that always gets lost from Ephesians 5.
Yeah.
That submit to each other, mutually submit to each other, be reciprocal. So those words, I will say, are hopeful.
On the guy's side, we were told by purity culture that if we just held out until marriage, we would have phenomenal sex lives. And so how do you think, and Seth is calling me from the bathroom, which can only mean one thing. So I'm going to miss the first part of this answer. But how does this view, how would you say that how this view hurts men? It's from my perspective, it seems like it's horribly tragic for women, but it also seems like it's really missing the mark for guys too. I'd love for you to speak into that while I take care of business.
Well, I was talking about this with a man and a woman, and the man said, the woman and I were both agreeing how tragic this was for women. And he said, hold on, this is bad for me too. Like, this is not great for men. And I think a couple of the things that were brought up were, I do think, again, back to, you know, some of the books that were read frequently when I was newly married, and this idea that men have the high libido, women have a low libido. What if you don't? What if you're a man that isn't like walking around thinking about sex 100% of the day? Well, obviously then you're not a man, or you're not enough of a man, or I think those ideas are incredibly damaging. The fact that a lot of those books conflated masculinity with being an alpha male, with being powerful, with being completely highly sexed. Those are super damaging views, because what if you're not? What if you're sensitive? What if you're artistic? What if you're creative? What if you're all these things? And what if you're not an alpha male? What if you're not? I think just from what this one man said, he just said, this is incredibly damaging because I'm not those things. So I can't be a real man.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, like along the lines of mutuality and stuff, when I think it sets both parties up for disappointment. The reality of it, the reality of what life is really like, it sets people up for disappointment and resentments, unmet expectations, as opposed to like deep, meaningful, soul connecting relationship, which I think is what the gift of sex actually is. So, yeah, I don't have anything else to add to that.
Yeah. Well, it's just so, it's so tragic because it rips sex out of, the accusation from the church is that, well, yeah, the problem with, pornography or whatever is that sex gets ripped out of, a committed relationship. But the church does the same mistake, right? That your whole marriage is evaluated by that act, or the gospel is pictured by that act, or whatever. It's the same error, an entirely different direction with differently, traumatic results. And so I just have been reflecting on, I understand why guys would teach this, but it's so anti-Jesus. I mean, Jesus was so clear that if your right eye causes you to stumble, pluck it out. Right? I mean, nothing about what the women should be doing in that scenario. So, as we...
Can I ask a question? Sorry.
Yeah, well, of course.
Can I ask a question?
I was hoping to ask you guys more questions, but yes.
And I mean, like, you might go into this at some point, but the one question that I had and what last week was, then what do we do with the fact that Jesus didn't have sex?
Whoa. I mean, maybe Dan Brown was right. Maybe he did. I know. Or Paul's exhortations to singleness.
Yeah.
Yep, totally.
Because it seems like the whole thing has been just elevated, in such a way that that's a big missing link for me,
One of the critiques is that I think he mistakes one flesh for the sexual act, as opposed to one flesh being a new kinship unit that is symbolized by the act, but the unit is so much bigger than that. And what it's picturing is so much bigger than that. And I think that's what Paul's getting at in Ephesians 5 with the marriage metaphor.
Yeah, because I know plenty of people who don't have oneness in their marriage, but have great sex. Right. And couples that have incredible oneness in their marriage, but they don't have great sex. Yeah. For whatever reason, you know?
Yep. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, this is historically been done. The View has been explained as a way of picturing the traditional sexual ethic and the reasoning and the goodness behind it, is that only married heterosexual sex gives you a picture of the gospel. And, which is interesting because I always thought in Genesis 1, it was the male and female joining together that didn't give a picture of the gospel, but gave a picture of the fullness of God's image, and And so one of the critiques I've read has been, to your point, Katie, so you can achieve this gospel picture then outside of marriage too, if that's all it is.
Yeah.
Is the woman receiving and the man giving. How do we help the sisterhood that's been traumatized? Because the thing I'm hearing so clearly, and this is what I was hoping to talk about, is with what you were told as, late teenagers and in college about what sexuality is, how could you not, even with the disclaimers, how could you not hear that first chapter through that grid, right? There's just no way you could not hear it that way. How do we help the sisterhood who's been harmed by that? Like what are practical things to do? Obviously talking about it, great, and presenting better views of feminine sexuality, totally get that. But like, how do we help? How do we build communities that allow for this sort of repentance on the one hand by those who've held the view, but also the healing of those who've been harmed by it?
I would say don't skip over or don't minimize, talk about it. Give a better, that's huge. I think words are magic. I think that when a woman or a man is given a space to speak their vulnerable truth and their experience of harm, and it is received with empathy and kindness, it changes how they internally hold it. And there are definitions of trauma. I'm going to forget the name of the people. I'm on a board of a counseling center. I should know these things because we quote this guy all the time. But the definition of trauma is sharing your pain and not having it be met with empathy. So I think there is something really unique about creating a space, even by doing this podcast, where then if someone else were to come to you and say, you know what, I've had these messages said to me, and then they're received with empathy, that actually does shift something internally for people. And then to be given something different, something new, I think is amazing. And I think that this is where, in a lot of ways, it's women holding women and saying, me too, I have felt that too. I'm so sorry. Here's my experience with it. Here's where I found hope in it. And I'm offering that to you. But I think it's just as important for men to speak into it and say, that is not how I see it. That is not how I see you. That is not what I think you're worth. That is not, and to be a man that calls forth from women all of their gifts, and create space for them to notice the circles they're in. Are women speaking into your life? Are women a part of what you do? That actually really changes everything. I think, the more, and I currently, my boss is, I had a lot of really difficult experiences with pastors over the years because of these issues. And the boss I have now is also a pastor and has been really healing for me. Even if it hasn't been directly speaking into these issues, his way of being with women has really been healing. So I just think all of that is all that you can do. I don't really know what else you can do, but I think creating these places matters. I don't know what you would say to that, Susie.
Suze?
Love to hear.
Yeah, that was beautifully said, Katie. I think the holding space is such a huge thing because, in order to do that, you have to acknowledge that everybody's experience is different and their process is different, right? So if we're talking about our sisters who have been harmed, there's loads of different ways that happens, and it affects people all differently. And making room for people's unique experience and creating from a church standpoint, we try to create spaces for God to meet people in their story. So, they're going to come with different histories and different things that they're dealing with, and trusting that God can meet them in that space. And we don't have to hurry the space along. We don't have to hurry the process along. And we are not the ones who are going to heal somebody's trauma, but the Lord is the one who heals people's trauma. Jesus is the balm to their pain, and we're simply just witnesses to that.
Mm-hmm. And I think there is something in the humility of Jesus in particular that does heal. I mean, if you're really going to look at how Jesus interacted, even as a 12-year-old, just going home with his parents he's teaching the world in that temple, and his parents are like, "You scared us, get home now." He said, "Okay, okay, I have good work to do, but okay." And, there's so many examples of humility that I think do really speak to us. And, I just had a thought. What was it? I'm going to lose it.
It'll come back. It'll come back. Interrupt the minute it comes back. That's so good. Tim, what are you thinking? Any questions that you want to throw out or thoughts you want to throw out?
So much of this is like when we have these conversations or see these things, they seem to be about, and we've talked about this with many different topics, that it's about treating like symptoms, not causes of things. Mm-hmm. And we're in a time period. I was just thinking, like, Mike, when you're like, we were told in junior high that this was like, or high school, that, if you wait, blah, 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 blah. But it wasn't just that. It was also like, growing up in, I grew up in the 80s. So the movies were very specific to objectify women and do this kind of process that I internalized. And the church didn't combat that. It like ordained it.
Baptized it, yep.
And kind of changed the way that it approached it. But the message was largely similar. Like, women were here to serve you. And so it's, as we watch like a Me Too movement or a Church Too movement, as we react and people are finally able to speak about abuse or these things that have happened, it's like, man, how do we go and change the whole conversation? Because it's the conversation, because we're just having the same conversation generation by generation. And, and right now part of the church is having a very big reactionary moment to progress and grasping back to holding on to what they are saying is the core tenets of who we are as a body. And so I think that's why an article like this gets traction. It's why people like Driscoll still has a huge platform. It's why MacArthur still exists. It's why Piper still exists. It's, these guys all have been carrying this narrative for so long. And what I keep coming back to is, how do I change the conversation? I had to repent 10 years ago about being like a cog in this wheel, somebody who has helped to push this agenda forward, because it was sewn into my DNA. And there was a moment where I was like, sex is not this thing that's, I don't know, I had to rewire the entire thing. And I also had to rewire the stuff that you guys have been talking about with the need and the, like, it's your job to, or that men have higher libidos, or that men are so visually stimulated and stuff. It's like, it's because of the program that we were given earlier that we're even wired that way. But it's not inherent to being a man. It is inherent to being a male who leaned into the story or the narrative that I was given. And so it's like opting out of that is possible. But it'd be nice to figure out how to change that conversation. Like, for my son, like, this is not your story. This is not your trajectory. And have that same conversation with my daughter. This is not your story. This is not your trajectory. But that's 2 people out of, 4 billion. So I don't know. It's really frustrating to watch this conversation. The same thing with Twitter, like watching Twitter just roll through this stuff and watching all these women lament and just say, are we still having this conversation? And that, this article is not new. It's indicative of a system that is still perpetuating this story. So it's not a question, but.
And I think what you said about it being so baked in, I mean, I recently heard a sermon of a pastor whose 90% of the other sermons I listened to, I really liked. But what was explicitly said a couple times was, Mike, you alluded to this, if you wait to have sex until you're married, you will have, your life will be blessed. Not just your sex life, your whole life. If you obey and you wait, then it's all blessed. And if you don't, then your life will be full of pain. And that idea was said 3 different times, that explicitly. And I just, to Susie's point about caring for people, I mean, my life's been messy. I did not walk a straight line. And so when you're me and you're sitting in a church service and that is said over you and into you, there's just not much you can interpret.
Right.
If your life has been really messy, other than, oh, well, I guess, but the other truth is I did it right. I did wait.
Yeah.
And everything didn't go great. And also people who don't have had an okay time. And I know. And I did listen to this. I listened to this other podcast where the person was like, I mean, God's really great at a lot of things, but not math. Like, things don't add up, and that's okay. Like, there's this mystery. He just doesn't get math. He's not great at math. And I agree with that. I mean, there's the way we understand math. I just think it's, but I think if the point that we're trying to, if we're going to reclaim that hospitality word, and Lord Jesus, please help us do so, we have to make church safe for all people who have walked straight lines, people who have had tornadoes come blow right through the center of there. Even if they've been walking a straight line, you get a tornado. And then sometimes you veer, and sometimes, I mean, these ideas are just so harmful to people whose lives have not gone the way of the 1%, where they did all the right things, waited till they were married, got married, and lived happily ever after. I mean, how many people truly can claim that?
I don't know any.
I don't know many, right? And so I think if we're talking about caring for people, we have to change these ideas so that all people can fit and see themselves in God and see themselves in Jesus.
Yeah, it's such a large package, because it's that, and it's also like, we've talked a lot about the amount of shame that we all carried into our marriages because of X, Y, and Z. And then when that promise doesn't pay off from high school or whatever, then you're just like, oh no. You start to think, since it's delivered as a spiritual gift and message, when it doesn't happen, you're like, well, then what did I do wrong? You're right, like the tornado or whatever, like how did I go off path? Because I thought I did this the way that it was promised me. But then that opens up whole new doors of trauma and shame and different things within relationships that's so unnecessary. But it's gonna rear its head anyway. And it's like, this conversation is so much bigger than, there's just so many little satellites to it that can feel daunting.
Well, it's interesting to me that a lot of the people who are speaking up quite a bit about deconstruction, who are kind of like the people you think about when you think about deconstruction and all of that, many of those people are also talking about purity culture and the damage that it's done. And so I just really wonder if the purity culture, the elevation and the idolization of great sex and marriage, like that being the finish line, if that in fact has damaged the gospel witness for many people.
I think totally.
All right, I'm going to let you guys go. This has been absolutely wonderful. I'm so grateful to both of you for sharing your wisdom and experience and just kind of helping us process.
Thank you for listening to this conversation. Voxology is a 501c3 nonprofit organization that is supported by listeners just like yourself. If you'd like to partner with us, you can do so at patreon.com/Voxology. You can also join the community and hang out and chat with us on the socials. Facebook.com/Voxology Podcast and on Instagram @Voxology. Thank you for walking the long road with us.